Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Nine Vibes. Recently, I've been posting a lot of videos that have been a little bit in depth. So I thought what I would do is just do a fly-by-night video and kind of explain some of this stuff. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. The first thing that we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the journey of the soul and the ego. Okay, so I gave an example today about what that looks like, but now what we're going to do is we're going to kind of just break it down a little bit more so you can see a demo of this. All right, inside of your body is 7 chakras. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. All right, you have your root, your sacral, your solar plexus, your heart, your throat, your third eye, and your crown. Okay, these are your 7 chakras. Now, these are resistors. And the important part to understand about a resistor is that a resistor's job is to mitigate power. It's to mitigate electricity. And so it holds, okay? So there's a reason that these are called chakras, is because a chakra is a wheel, okay? And so it holds energy and it disperses it when it has a command to disperse the energy, okay? So what ends up happening in your life, and we're going to use an example of very, very young, okay? So what ends up happening in your life is that you start off as a baby, all right? Not much thought, just kind of living life, exploring things, and then you become a child, okay? Now at this point, you love life, you're exploring life. Every bug is amazing. Every incident is exciting. Every noise is music. I mean, it's just a wonderful place to be. Okay. And so now you are a child, but what's the next phase? The next phase is a teenager. Okay. So an example of this would be at your root chakra, the root of who you are is a child. It's a child that loves life and enjoys life and has fun, doesn't care about, obviously doesn't understand duality and bills and all of those different things. Okay, doesn't understand responsibility. That's an important part that we put on children, is that they're not responsible. If a child makes a mistake, they're not responsible. And so there's no responsibility with being a child. And when you move into a teenager, one of the very first things that a teenager wants is responsibility. They want to watch their younger sibling. They want to, so if you're a teenager old enough to drive, then you want to drive the car. You want the responsibility. Okay. Now, the interesting thing is what you do at this point. And so here it is at your root chakra, you were a child. And then you decide you want to be defined and labeled as a teenager. And when you do that, what happens is you have to move into a new area from your root chakra, right? You need to change your relationships. You need to change your experience with your body. You need to change how you even interact in the world. And so part of your soul stays back as the child, and it stays here. And the reason it stays here is because just because you decide that you want to experience something doesn't mean that you know better. Your soul knows what is best for you. And so whether you get in that marriage or you get in that relationship or you take that job or you become a parent or you just become a teenager, your soul knows what's best. So what it does is it holds a place inside just in case that doesn't work out. Just in case you want to go back to that moment, because inside of here is all the energy of being a child. It's all the experience and all the energy that you have. Okay, so it stays here. So as you become a teenager and you start moving up and you start having new relationships, right? It's one of the first things with being a teenager is, have relationships. Okay, then you start eating healthier, or worse, you start changing your eating habits to match the teen habits. Then you start speaking words, right, that teens speak. And then you start perceiving your world through your third eye projection, what your world looks like. Okay. And then you experience it. You don't actually reach your crown chakra unless you were a teenager who has zero fear, who has worked through all these. And these are all the highest vibrations of who you are as a teen. And the sad thing is the majority of us didn't really have that awareness or understanding. So it's kind of a big cluster as you go up. Okay. But the point is that you decide to be a teenager. So everything in your life starts to apply to this, except for your root chakra, because your root chakra still holds that child. So what do? What happens in society whenever you have one side on this side and one side on this side. You start to judge. You start to judge the other side. So you have a child in here, or at your root chakra, you're trying to live as a teenager, which means you're going to separate yourself from all children. You ever notice that your child who basically comes into being a teenager first completely wants nothing to do with the younger ones, wants their own room, doesn't want to be viewed as a child anymore. They start judging the child side of themselves. And they do that so that they can let go and experience it as a teenager. There's nothing wrong with these things. We do that all the time. The point is that if you don't understand what you're doing, then you can't fix or recorrect or even reunite the child with the teenager or the child with the adult. Okay. We do this often in our lives. And so then you end up at 50 years old, as I said in one post, you end up at 50 years old, going all the way back to enjoying life, being a child, only caring about the things that truly matter. Okay. But you didn't have to. You didn't have to go through this whole entire process if you were in a state of awareness, because there's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to experience life as a teenager without having to denounce being a child. And in fact, if you brought that joy into being a teenager, you might have a completely different experience as a teenager. All right. So that is one example of how this works inside of our body. And that was one example. We do this all the time. We do it with relationships. We do it with any label that you call yourself. Okay. And that's one of the reasons that I focus on not paying attention to labels, is because if you label yourself an empath, all right, then that means that a part of you is not an empath. Because before you labeled yourself an empath, you were not one. You were not walking an empath's life. And what ends up happening is when you think that it was chosen for you, when you think that you didn't choose to be an empath, then you go back through your life and you go, oh, I was 2 and 5 and 7 and 8, and I was experiencing all of these things and I didn't know what it was, right? A lot of people say those things, but the reality is all you're trying to do is you're trying to put puzzle pieces into a puzzle that no longer exists, okay? You did not become an empath against your free will. You chose to be an empath. And you didn't choose it in a time that was outside of this experience. You chose to be an empath here and now. You just forgot it. Because chances are what happened is you experienced something so horrific, so traumatic, or so intense that you kind of erased all of it together and forgot about that moment that you went, wow, now that I understand what this feels like, I can help other people. Because we don't think that way. When you're in your trauma, all you see is your trauma. When you're in pain, all you see is pain. Which is why that great quote that says, when all you see is your pain, you lose sight of God. Because the whole point is that's all that you see. But the reality is that everything in your life you chose. You chose at one point. Now, the things that happen in your life, such as car accidents or injuries and things like that, things just happen. If I roll a stone all the way down the street, there's a possibility that somebody on a skateboard is going to hit that stone. And that's not their fault. Things just happen. But in terms of the things that you take personal in your life, those are the things that you chose. And specifically, all the labels in your life. You do not wake up as an empath. You do not wake up as a Christian. Okay. It's another one people don't like talking about. They think that because of the fact that they've been a Christian their whole life. No, you are not been a Christian your whole life. You chose to be a Christian. There was a point where you went to church and you did not enjoy it. And then there's a point that you chose to be a Christian. You chose to bring those stories into your life. And I'll be talking about that here in a second. Okay. So we do this all the time. We pick different topics. We label ourselves them. And then we take the other part, right? So you label, and then the other part that was before the label, so we'll call it the before, has to stay in your chakra. Why? Because just because you decide you want to be something doesn't mean that's the end of all. Doesn't mean that's going to be who you're going to be your whole life. And so you either have to relearn everything about the before, or you keep it, you store it, right? If you have a computer and you upgrade to Windows 11, but you don't like Windows 11, you can restore back to Windows 10. That's exactly what you're doing. You're saving information. So where does this become a problem? And that's what we're going to talk about. This becomes a problem when you start judging the other side. When you add a negative charge to that information, okay? So for whatever reason, let's say Christian, we'll take Christian, okay? So at your root chakra, you've decided to be a Christian. And I apologize if you can't see, hopefully me talking about it, you'll understand this. You decide that you want to be a Christian. Okay. And so now that you've decided to be a Christian, you are going to slowly forget what it was like to be not a Christian. Okay. Not to be Christ-like. You're going to forget what it was like. You're going to forget the judgments that you placed on other people or the lostness that you felt before you found this label. Okay. And so Christian, not Christian, you're going to slowly forget this. And once you forget what it was like, then you start judging people that you think are not Christian. You're going to start creating your own examples of what a Christian doesn't look like, what an empath doesn't look like, what a teenager doesn't look like, what a person in a relationship doesn't look like. We do this quite often. And so once you start judging, right, other people, then it comes back to you. And that's why they say that judging is all about you. You don't know the person. You don't know their walk. You don't know their talk. You don't know what they've been through. In fact, I believe it is the Bible that says that only God knows what's in someone's heart. And that is the truth. It doesn't matter the documentary, the Netflix show you watch. You don't know what is going on in someone's mind. You don't know what's going on in my mind. I don't know what's going on in your mind. That's not the goal. The goal is not to read someone's mind. The goal is to read someone's heart. And the reality is that when you judge someone, you put yourself in their shoes and you say to yourself, I don't understand this. So you judge it. And so then because you don't understand it, because you don't put in the effort to try to understand it, you judge on autopilot. You just start automatically judging things. And soon that autopilot is going to cause conflict in your life. Because if your soul knows that not being a Christian was an easier path for you, and being a Christian is the one that you chose, then it is going to have conflict. Okay, it's going to constantly have conflict back and forth. And that's what you experience. You experience the conflict. You experience the part of you that you call the ego that wants to run things, the side of you that says, wait a minute, something isn't right here, that wants to run things, because you do not want to accept that the choices that you made were your choices. Right? That's basically what that comes down to.